Good morning. We want to welcome you to this special webinar, and we will see how this goes as we work through this today. We're glad to have several that have joined us and others that will watch this later on as we present today the Insider's Guide to Impacting Church Guests. And what we want to do is, as we get started, I want to mention to you that to all those who are listening that there will be a special offer for you from the Jenkins Institute as we close today, and we'll talk more about that later. We want to mention right now a couple of things that we do at the Institute. Is the For Monday. If you do not receive that, if you'll shoot us an email to the Jenkins Institute at gmail.com, we will be more than happy to add you to that list of folks that receive that, and we'd love to be able to share it with you. So be aware of that as well. We also want to mention to you that we began something just recently called Stat Saturday, and so this is a one-question survey that folks can do and be a part of, so be aware of that and know about that as well. So Jeff, that's all the announcement we need to make. If you're ready, let's go ahead and get started with our Insider's Guide to Impacting Church Guests.
Well, Dale, always in church work and when we're involved in preaching and in ministry, we're interested in how we should treat guests when they come to visit with us and how we should, what we should do. A lot of times we have questions about methods and ideas about how we're to reach out to guests. And some people look at guests kind of as intruders. Maybe they're not, they seem not to be welcome, but we believe that guests in worship times are gifts from God. And so we want to make the most of every opportunity that we have to reach out to people who come and visit our worship services.
Jeff, these are folks that are interested in us. They've made an effort to be at our services, and we might call them the low-hanging fruit. We don't have to go out in the highways and byways reach out to these folks. We just go and be friendly to them when we're there, make an impact on them while they're there. So let's talk, Jeff, as we get started. We've got about 9 things we're going to talk to you about today. Let's start by talking about before the guests arrive. What are some things that we can do before our guests arrive to reach out to them?
Well, it's our conviction that most of the work that's done to be able to help visitors, to help them feel comfortable, to be able to reach out to them is done actually before they arrive. A lot of times people show up and we think, what do we do now? But the truth is, most of what we do should be done before they arrive. And so there's a lot of different ways that we can connect with people. There's a lot of different ways that we can reach out to people, and much of it is done actually, as we said, before they arrive.
You know, it's a mentality, Jeff, of outreach. It's having an attitude that we want to be prepared to welcome our guests. And, you know, somebody said not long ago that the front door of most church buildings is no longer the front door as we used to see it, but our door is our website. And if you have a website, you don't have to have a billion-dollar website, but you can create one that is inviting and friendly and that says we'd like to have guests and that gives information to people who would be guests. And so develop your website that says we're glad that you are coming our direction, and that gives information like times of services, location, what to expect when you get there. Make it not cluttered, and make it clean and simple to navigate through. And there are a number of good brethren out there that either build websites or can help you with them, and it's not that hard to build your own. But your website, Jeff, is really kind of the start, but then once they get to the building, what does it say about us?
Well, of course, a lot of times the first thing that people see when they drive up is what does the building look like from the outside? What about the grounds? Does it look like the yard has been kept up, the churchyard? Does it look like that there's been some, in the springtime, some new flowers planted? And what is the building? Does it say the building grounds? Does it say that people are welcome here?
Yeah, and it's hard, isn't it? When you live in a house, there's that commercial going on that you become nose deaf. You don't well. So I think you become visually deaf too, or blind in a way, and you may not see the clutter you have in the foyer in various places, and you may not see everything that's going on that everybody else sees. Try to look at it from a guest standpoint. Do they see people who are cluttered and uninviting? If the building needs a fresh coat of paint outside, that may be a small and simple thing, but I would recommend that maybe you just try to put a little fresh paint in there if you have to. So before the guests arrive, you can learn an awful lot.
Dale, I think
so Jeff, let's talk important praying for our guests.
I think you mentioned, Dale, just briefly that we've got to have a mentality, again, that we want people to come and join us. We want people to visit with us. And when they come to our worship services or our events, we want them to know that they're welcome. And so another thing that we do, in addition to having this mentality to welcome guests, is we need to spend some time in prayer. I wonder how often in our congregation we pray that God would help us to be the kind of people who are welcoming to those who come and visit us. Do we pray for visitors, that God would send visitors our way through the invitations that we give, through our websites, and through other events?
And I would say, we need to publicly, maybe at times when we're not expecting a lot of guests, pray that we will react to our guests appropriately and properly, and let people know that develops kind of a mentality in the congregation of we want these people. They're people who have souls, and we care about them. So, Jeff, number 3, we'd suggest to you that you need to have a follow-up program in place, a follow-up plan in place, even before they arrive. And that would be, what are you going to do after they come? What are you going to do?
And
have that.
There are many ways that we can think about before the guests even come. How are we going to respond to them? How are we going to express our appreciation to them for being there? And so there are a myriad of ways that can be done. You can do that through sending emails to people, letting them know that we were glad that they were here. We can do that through phone calls, through visits, and there are many, many ways. But we need to have a plan in place before they get there.
Okay, Jeff, moving quickly through these. Number 4, we suggest to you that you have a welcome center. Jeff, tell a little bit about the Starship Welcome Center at the Louisville Church. Y'all got quite a welcome center there.
Dale, let me mention, just before we move on to that, I want to mention that we have a group of retired men in the congregation here at Louisville, and they meet every Tuesday morning. They meet at 9 o'clock, and we have our weekly ladies Bible study class at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, and the ladies start arriving early, and they bring cookies, and these men go out and visit either that day or that night on Tuesday. They visit every person who has visited our services on the Sunday before. And they take with them a batch of cookies that were homemade cookies by our ladies, or a pie or something like that. And that's a part of that plan that we use to reach out to people, and we know that's going to happen before they arrive. And so those men get together every week, and they're looking forward to getting that list of visitors, of our guests from Sunday, so they can go out and visit. Dale, every church ought to have some kind of way, some kind of welcome center. Some of the early churches we preached in, the foyer was probably about a 4x4 size, and you couldn't get a welcome table in there. But I remember we set up just a little small coffee table, and we put a sign on it, and it just said welcome, and we put some tracts and some information about the church on that. Now we have a welcome center that's probably 10 by 10 or 10 by 12, and it was made by one of our members. He made it himself, and it's very beautiful. And there's signs all over the welcome center, and there's information about the church that people can pick up. And so some way there needs to be a place where people can know that they're being recognized. People can know that they're being welcomed.
Okay, so you may not be able to afford just a huge area and everything, but you can pay attention at Welcome Center and have one and have something there for people who come and who are there. We'd say number 5 that you need to pay attention to signage. Pay attention to make sure there's. We just recently added out front of our building a sign where you turn into the parking lot that says guest parking down front. We had guest parking for several years, but we never had a place that identified where the guest parking was. And so the idea behind that is, one, it provides a place, but 2, it provides for you as a congregation sort of a filter for where you expect your guests to go. And so you have more people who are involved in the welcoming in that area because you filtered your guests through a certain area, and that helps you out a little bit, I believe. So that's one thing, signage before they get into the building, the lot, there's a place for guest parking. But once they get inside, there needs to be some signage as well.
Dale, let me go back and mention just one thing about the parking. I think every church ought to have special parking spaces for visitors and or guest parking, and it doesn't matter the size of the congregation. You could mark off, if it's a small congregation, you could mark off 2 or 3 special parking spaces, mark off a number of parking spaces closest to the building, closest to an entrance, preferably the main entrance where people can park who are guests. And Dale, at Louisville, we have an awning that people drive under, if it's raining or bad weather. Most congregations have something like that. And we have some men who stand out there, and they're actually there, and they do valet parking for people. They don't expect a tip. They don't get paid anything like that, but they valet park people's cars, and they have umbrellas with them. If it's raining, they're willing to let the people out of their car, and then they go out they park their car, and then they have an umbrella to be able to walk back in. So it's just another way to welcome guests. And
yeah, when I first heard about that, I thought, well, that's nice for a really large church that y'all have people who can do that. But the truth is that the number of visitors the number of guests often correlates to the number of members that you have. And so if you have 30 people, you may only have one guest. You could have valet as a small group of folks. You wouldn't have to have a large group of people to valet. So you could offer that regardless of there's signs, aren't there? There's like classroom signs, classrooms are first in your service, especially signs showing where the restrooms are. If you have an annual theme or a theme for the day that you use, or if you have a first aid kit or group, make sure it's signed well. Make sure the signs are large and legible. Make sure they're up to date. We have some security cameras on our property, and when I first saw some signs that went up that said security cameras in process, I thought, oh man, I can't believe we put that up. But then I started thinking about it, and that gives a lot of sense of security to some of the guests who are there that we care about that for that to happen.
So, you can. I don't think you can have too many signs. I think that you ought to put signs up so that people will know where they're going. Like you mentioned, classrooms, where are the restrooms, where's the nursery. A big thing would be nursery, especially if you have families who come from the community that have children. And you can have somebody there to direct them to those places, but make the signs so that people can see them and so that they point to the right direction. Dale, next thing on our list, number 6, is I want to talk about preparing people to welcome the guests when they get there. And sometimes we call those people greeters. Some people call them ushers. The question is, are greeters and ushers the same thing? Talk a little bit about those folks, Dale.
Well, they're very important in the congregation, and if you don't have them, it will show up. And you want to say, well, we're real friendly people, but if you don't have some people that are designed to help show that friendliness, it'll slide through the cracks, and you'll end up, if you're not careful. Jeff, my experience is that every church believes that they're friendly. They think themselves to be friendly, but not every church is friendly. Sometimes they're just friendly to each other. So you need to prepare and train some people that are greeters specifically, whose job is to greet people, whose job is to make them feel welcome, and then some people who are ushers whose job is to direct people in their place, help them find a seat. That could be the same person, but there are some differences in the roles. Now, Jeff, there's some specific things I want to say that you need to train them to do, and this may seem trite, but it is not. It is extremely important. Train them to smile. I mean, let them know, man, we are glad these people are here, and train them to smile. Train them that when they reach out to shake a hand of a man, to give them their name, to introduce themselves to the women. Train them to be helpful and to know where classes are and who to see about what in the congregation. Train them, Jeff, and I think this is extremely important, to harvest names. The number one thing that our greeters do is they get a name, and then they remember that name, and as soon as that person is out of sight, they write that name down so that then we can do follow-up, because without a name, there's not a whole lot we can do.
So you don't. What you're saying is, you want people who smile, people who act like they're glad to be there. You don't want your most negative people, the most critical people, the people who never smile. You don't want those to be the first people that somebody meets when they come to visit the services. And then we have a group of men who stand. They literally stand at the door, the main lobby entrance when people come in, and they open the door for people. And there's a group of them, and they open the door as people walk in. They stick their hand out to say hi to them. Then as they come in, they see the large welcome center, and there are ladies and men who are standing there inside the welcome center, waiting to answer people's questions about where the class, if they have children, where do my children go to class? Who do I need to see if I have a question about the church? Is there an elder close by that I can speak with? And those people know where the folks are, they know where they go to class, and if they don't know, they know somebody who can help them find that.
And that, Jeff, that is extremely important. We do the same. We have 3 couples every Sunday there at the front door, and they try to meet people. Sometimes we even meet them at their car just after they get out. Don't want to freak them out or anything, but get close enough to their car to meet them. So greeters are exceptionally important if you're going to welcome guests, and a lot of churches have stopped doing that for some reason. And if you have, you need to start doing that. Jeff, number 7, we would suggest to you, we want to talk a little bit about recognizing guests versus not recognizing guests. We've both been places and seen places where they do all sorts of things when it comes to recognizing guests. How do you identify guests as a church? Jeff, what do you do? Do you say, all right, we're glad you're here, want our guests to stand? Is that the best way to do that, or what do you suggest?
Well, I think every situation is unique, and people, your community, what may work in the congregation where you serve may not work where somebody else is, but every church ought to know their community. They ought to know how people respond and how people react, and so there was a time years ago, churches went into a pattern of having all the guests stand, and then they would give them a packet that had a welcome on the front, and it had a picture of it, had a little rose, and they'd take that rose off and stick it on their lapel or on their shirt. And so that was kind of, almost a fad that churches went through. 22 years ago, I moved to Oklahoma, and I'd never seen this done before, but the church there had a practice in Oklahoma of having the visit. They would begin by saying, if you're a visitor today, we want you to stay right where you are. Just sit down where you are, and all of our members are going to stand up and greet you. And so the members stood up and greeted the people who were sitting down. Again, the question is, do you want to single people out in either of those ways, or do you just want to welcome them through when they enter the door through your greeters and through your ushers and those other kind of ways?
I think you're right, Jeff. What you said is really true. You need to know your area, and maybe it's going to be different in one place than another, but anything that you do that singles people out It is, most people say, most even guests say that embarrasses them. They've already kind of gone out on a limb by being there, and you single them out, it makes them feel singled out, makes them feel embarrassed. So let's talk a little bit more about this. Our goal when we have guests is we really would like to get a name and an email address. Name and an email address. Now, you may use cards, attendance cards. You may use clipboards. You may use iPads or something like that to register guests. But we have clipboards we pass around when we get started. We send one down every row, and we just say, if you'll provide your name and your email address, we'll send you a follow-up email, and we'll let you communicate with you through that. And I would suggest that if you get information, regardless of what you get, use any information you ask for, and then tell them how you're going to use it. We're going to send you an email, a survey, or we're going to send you an email that invites you to be a part of the group or whatever. But I would suggest that you try to harvest that information, and I would suggest that less in this day and time is more. Less is more. I don't think you need a whole lot of information. An email address and a name, and if they want to provide you with more, let them provide you with more. But don't push them to write a whole bunch of stuff down.
Yeah, one of the things that we've tried to do, and I didn't come up with this idea, I don't remember where I first heard about it, but if I meet somebody, and as the preacher, if you're the preacher, if you're an elder in the church, I'd encourage you to look for guests. Sometimes your members may not know who all the guests are, because they may not know who all the members are. But if you're the preacher or you're an elder and you've been there very long, you probably know who all the members are. Therefore, you'll know who the guests are. And when you meet the guests, and I would encourage you, I hope you spend time going around to meet the guests before the worship services start. That'll make a tremendous impression on people, on young children and on older folks. And so when you meet them, if you find out a little bit about them, maybe ask them if they're visiting in town, if they live here, where they work, and just act like you're genuinely interested in them, and hope it's more than an act, that you are genuinely interested in them. And then what we would recommend is to, like if I meet a couple and they have 2 teenage children, I go find a couple of families that have 2 teenage children, and I say, I want to encourage you, Tom, Karen, go over there and meet this couple, that they have a couple of teenagers, and take your boys over there and let them meet them as well.
I call that, Jeff, being intentionally friendly. It's specifically targeting guests with friendly people. So we have the same thing. I'll say, Steve, will you go over and meet these folks? Or you're right over there, guy in the striped shirt. Go speak to him. And so we target those. Now, hopefully, everybody's already being friendly, but you want to make sure that that happens. You want it to happen organically, but sometimes you have to kind of force it a little bit. And it's better to force it than not to have it happen. So we think that's really important. Jeff,
well, Dale,
number 8.
Let me say one more. If you have to force it to begin with, but what you're doing, in addition to letting those visitors and guests meet families, you're training those families to become intentional, like you're talking about.
All right, number 8, Jeff. We're going to talk a little bit about the service itself. Everything we've said to this point has been before the service began. But once the service begins, there's some important things that you can do. And first of all, we would remember that in the ministry, it wasn't the whole idea of seeker-friendly services that was so viral 20 years ago, and being, reaching out to your community and stuff like that through your services did not exist. If the guests showed up at their services, 1 Corinthians 14 indicates it would be a shock. If you've got people speaking in tongues in the first, they said if an outsider showed up in your service, they would be alarmed. It's almost like you would be shocked if they showed up, but then they'd be shocked if they saw disruption there. So worship service, Jeff, really is for members of the church. It's not really designed for.
And so when we begin the worship service, somebody is going to actually stand in front of the assembly and begin the service. Sometimes,
hey, Jeff, you get to do that. You get old Sourpuss to do that?
Sometimes a song leader will do that. The first person up will be the person who's leading the singing. Sometimes it'll be the preacher, sometimes it'll be an elder or maybe a member who makes announcements, but the first thing you need to do is to welcome everybody, and it needs to be a person who is, number one, they're glad that they're there themselves, and they're genuinely glad that other people are there, and so they're positive, they're upbeat, and you get the first words out of somebody's mouth in some ways is going to determine the experience that the guests have who've come to be with us on that day.
If their job is to welcome people, use welcoming people to welcome people. And I would recommend, though every church is going to be different in this perhaps, that not be a time for a lot of announcements. If you have announcements, use PowerPoint, use a bulletin, a worship handout. If it's a small announcement that involves 5 or 10 people, just involve those 5 or 10 people, have them make it. Don't make it a time, I would suggest, again, don't make it a time where you read your sick list. This is a time to welcome. Give the sick list to the guy leading the prayer. Pray for the people. Then you get up, and whoever does it, get up and just be welcome. We are glad in a little bit of time being welcoming. If you're going to have announcements, maybe do those at the close of the service, but make that time a time to welcome people. And definitely, we were preparing this some about this idea of insider language. What do we do about insider language? Because we didn't come together to worship guests. So how do you avoid insider language but still use church language? How do you do that?
Well, we have to remember that even sometimes when we make announcements or the way we conduct the worship service, that if we have visitors, if we have guests who come, if they weren't raised in the church or they don't have a background in the church, they may not understand some of the language we use. And I'm certainly not saying here that we should gear everything that we do toward those guests, because as you said, it's our belief that the worship service was designed for members to be edified, for members to be encouraged, but we don't want to ignore those guests who are there. And so we need to consider in the language we use, in the words that we speak, that we don't leave those people completely out.
And Jeff, we would say on special days, like Sunday before Christmas or Easter Sunday, or maybe you have a big festival of some sort in your community, and you're going to have, you anticipate having a number of guests. Take some time to explain who you are and what you're trying to do and what you do. Maybe you've got a guest there. You may have a Sunday where you'll have a number of guests there that don't go to church regularly, don't attend the Church of Christ. Take some time to explain. We're people who are trying to do things according to the Word of God. Take some time to explain. We take the Lord's Supper every Sunday. This is something we do every week. Take the time to say, you're welcome to sing with us. We sing as a congregation. Take some time to say, we don't expect our guests to give. The giving section of our worship is for our members. And you feel free to give if you'd like to, but that's not, we're not here to get your money. That sets them at ease. Just some things like that explain a little bit of what's going on when you know there's going to be a number of guests there. I think important. So Jeff, we're ready to move to number 9.
All right, number 9. What do we do after the service is over? Hopefully we welcome them as they came into the assembly. Hopefully we welcome them by having ushers and greeters out front. We provided plenty of information for them about what was going to go on during the day and where they could find their Bible classes and where the nursery was and all of those things. So what do we do now? We need to train our folks in the church following the service, not to just get in their little groups and just visit with their friends and their family, but to look around for people who are guests. Sometimes we make a statement. I often hear when I'm visiting somewhere, the preacher or an elder will stand up and they'll say, "We hope you'll stick around after the service is over today and let us get to know you better." And I've watched that on occasion where somebody makes that statement, the preacher will make that statement, and then everybody will get in their little groups and ignore. I've seen people who appear to be all by themselves. And so if we're going to tell people, stay around so we can get to know you better, we need to spend some time getting to know them better.
Jeff, I worshiped with the church and preached at church for a few years. We had an elder and his wife whose daughter and son-in-law came to the service at the same church. They come in, they sat together after the service, turn around and sat one row behind each other and turn around, they speak to each other. They spent 10 or 15 minutes with each other. By the time they finished talking to each other, they were gone. Avoid the temptation to ignore those guests. Here's some other things you can do. Invite a guest to lunch. That'll or if you're having any sort of meal, invite them directly. Don't just depend on a general announcement. Say, hey, we'd love you to stay and have lunch with us today, or I'd love to take you to lunch. Go eat with us today. And just in the service itself, as it's closing, tell them what's next. Tell them about the next service. Tell them about other opportunities that are in your wheelhouse, or instances that involve if there's a teen event and they've got teenagers, our teenagers get together Sunday night and do this, or if there's a child event and I'll have a child coming up, whatever it is, tell them about what's next, and that's something we think really, really help as well. We also would suggest to spend some time in follow-up, Jeff, and you mentioned already a group of folks that get together. And Monday, we have a group that's together on Monday, and they have some homemade cookies they take as well. And shortly after that visit, we just go and we say, we want to thank you for being our guest Sunday. And when we harvest email addresses, that's one of the things we do. Jeff, what are some other things that can be done? And you know of any others you want to add?
Well, of course, we have a visitors list each week that goes out to all of our elders and all of our deacons and all of our ministers. And we encourage all of our elders and deacons to send a personal email to everybody who's on that list. We require our ministers to send a personal email that's on that list. And there are other folks, key people, that do that just to welcome them and let them know we're glad you're here. I would ask them, as the preacher, do you have any questions about the church? Is there anything we can help you or your family with? And, of course, always say we hope you'll come back and be with us again. And so to do that, go ahead.
We do an email as well. And we'll sit down with a video camera or sometimes even with a computer camera and just say, Jim and Sally, we appreciate you being with us Sunday. Thank you for being our guest, and we'd love for you to come back. And that's just a little extra sometimes that we do.
You can send out letters, on church stationery. Some people still do that. You can have people go out and visit. We have a retired lady in the congregation who has a lot of time on her hand, and she personally calls each person who is on that list every week and welcomes them and gets information about them. She's very kind and very gracious kind of person, and so that's been a great help to us. Same lady for 12 years that I've been at Louisville has called people every single week, and she is now in the process of training a couple of other ladies to take that place when she's not able to do that anymore.
And I'd suggest to you that you take those email addresses and that you put them in a database, and that anytime you have a big event, you have a big spring fling or picnic or Easter egg hunt, if you do that, or whatever, any big event that you have, send that to everybody in that email list. If you have a friend day or whatever you do, any big event that you have, just send that to everybody on that database. I wouldn't use that too often, but I suggest to you that'd be one way to do it. So there are our 9 tips, Jeff, for helping our guests to feel welcome.
Well, we hope that, of course, you probably have ideas that we never heard of, and we'd be interested in learning about those. And if you have suggestions or ideas, and maybe we could share them with others, send us an email at thejenkinsinstitute@gmail.com and tell us your ideas, and we'll pass them along to others. And we want to learn from each other, and we appreciate so much the fact that you've joined us today.
We do. Thank you a lot. And we do want to make available to those. We said we had something special for those who are our guests that stayed with us to the end. And we want to make any of our books available to those who are listening to this webinar, Google Hangout. Any of our books are available to you from the Jenkins Institute website. They'll be on sale for the next 48 hours as our gift to you for being in this webinar for $8. Institute website. That's www.thejenkinsinstitute.com, and any of those are available to you for $8 for the next several hours. So again, thank you for being with us today. We hope you have a great day, and may God's blessings be yours. Is our prayer for you.